Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thomas College and the Lorette Ayotte Auditorium for the final public forum of this year's mayoral race for the city of Waterville. My name is Bob Moore. I'm Vice President of Advancement here and a proud graduate of the class of 1979. Thomas is honored to co-sponsor tonight's debate along with the Morning Sentinel, which is also being live streamed at centralmaine.com. To those viewers from around the state and beyond, we welcome you as well. Scott Monroe, managing editor of the Morning Sentinel and Kennebec Journal, will also be live tweeting the debate using the hashtag #WatervilleMayor. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce the moderator for tonight's mayoral forum. Dr. James Libby is the academic dean and a full professor here at Thomas College, as well as a former state senator and state representative. Jim also serves as a trustee for the Waterville Opera House and is a former trustee for the Maine Community College System. In his 12 years at Thomas, Jim has held a number of positions ranging from professor to chair of the business department to head coach of the men's basketball and golf teams. He is the author of 4 books, including The History and Politics of the University of Maine System. Jim is not only a tremendous asset to Thomas College, he is also a wonderful colleague and a good friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. James Libby.
Thank you very much, Bob, and good evening. Welcome to the Mayoral Forum of the 2014 election cycle for the city of Waterville, Maine. And as Bob Moore said, we're honored to join the Waterville Sentinel in supporting this event and sponsoring it. I would like to ask all of you to turn off your ringers. If you have a cell phone right now, if you wouldn't mind turning off your ringers for the event, we'd appreciate it. And now for the debate. Our rules as follows. The candidates will have up to 3 minutes for opening and closing statements and will be given up to 2 minutes to respond to my questions, which were jointly developed by me and the staff at the Waterville Sentinel. I also have a few questions from the audience that we plan on weaving in as well. I'll decide whether to ask follow-up questions or seek clarification on an issue, and I'll also be posing selected additional questions that are submitted by the audience, as I said earlier. Our timers are sitting in the front row, and they'll be working with me. Candidates, you don't have to worry about the timers because I intend to let you finish your thoughts as long as it doesn't go on long past the 3 minutes or the 2 minutes, depending on the question. The 3 candidates are sitting on the stage before us: Steve Aucoin, Nick Isgro, and Karen Rancourt-Thomas. I congratulate each of you on your candidacy, and now I ask you to introduce yourselves and the purpose of your candidacy to the audience. We're going to start in alphabetical order, so I'm going to start with you, Steve. You'll have 3 minutes for your introduction, and then we'll move on to Nick.
Thank you, Dr. Libby. Before I begin, let me thank the debate sponsors for this opportunity to participate in the care and feeding of democracy. That's what we're doing. I believe voters have a right to know the history of candidates, not just what they say, but what they have done. For years, I have stood on the front line of every civil rights movement. I have acted to assist those whose potential would be limited by discriminatory rules and attitudes. As a city councilor and a private citizen, I have worked to make sure government represents the working person, the little guy. I have helped to protect neighborhoods from attempts to allow commercial incursion into their residential areas. I helped these families make sure that promises were kept. When sewage truck deliveries through Lower Water Street disrupted people's lives, I sat down with the sewage district board and worked out a time frame of use acceptable to the neighborhood. And I was the councilor who moved to return its part of Mayflower Hill Drive to the control of Colby College. For years, I worked as a housing advocate for those with mental illness. For 6 more, I was a private contractor running my own business. I am that person who thinks outside the box, who attempts what others say cannot be done. Working for the Boys and Girls Club, I helped create North End Night, funded by donations solicited from over 40 North End businesses and individuals. It was and remains free for over 600 people, an end of the school year celebration. For 5 years, Kids with Cameras put together a professional exhibition open to the public and supported by voluntary contributions. It was open to every child in this area. It cost them nothing to enter their work. Every barrier was removed. Then we created Civic Day. In that annual event, children were chosen to act as city councilors for the day. In 1 year, a tribute statement written and read by a young participant was heard by Congressman Mike Michaud. That statement was read into the congressional record and now hangs in display at the club and at the young man's home. My record, my actions, and words are all about equal opportunity, opportunity to thrive and succeed. A few weeks ago, my Republican opponent in a Facebook post characterized those who live in public housing as, quote, worried about losing that monthly government check while they stroll to Dunkin' Donuts playing on their smartphones. I suggest that all stereotypes are useless. All demeaning stereotypes are destructive. Such statements exclude rather than include. The mother of that young man I referenced above is a single mom with 2 children, and they live in public housing. 3 years ago, she graduated first in her electrician's class from Kennebec Valley Community College. She was the only woman in that class. She now works as a union member at BIW every day in her trade, and soon she will buy her own home. She works 3rd shift so she can be home with her children during their waking hours. She is absolute proof that hard work and equal opportunity and community support is what is necessary to create a better and stronger community, and that benefits us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick, your introduction.
I just want to say thank you, everybody, coming here tonight. We're all here because Waterville is facing some very serious decisions, and those decisions are between 2 Democrats and a Republican. Right now, we have a choice of going back to the old way of doing things and thinking about next year or the year after that, or we can really set ourselves up with a long-term vision, because Waterville's issues that we face are not unique to Waterville. They're issues that people are facing all over the country. We are transitioning to a new economy of a 21st century, so we not only need somebody who needs to come from outside of current city government or past city government to really reset the dialogue with the community, but somebody who understands how events overseas or in this country affect our local economy. Somebody who can sit down with a business owner and have them say, Nick, I don't think I'm going to be able to make the payroll for this 1 or 2 jobs I want to add, so we can work together and understand those financials to create the tax incentives that we need to make his business successful. That's why we're here. I have the experience to do that, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Thank you very much, Nick. Karen?
Ladies, gentlemen, students, faculty, and alumnus, thank you for inviting me back. As an alumnus of Thomas College, it is an honor to be a Terrier in running for the office of mayor. I am proud that my son Nate has chosen to continue his education at Thomas College. Waterville has been my home for most of my life and will continue to be so for a long period of time. So when I say that the best interest of this wonderful city is one of my top priorities, one of my top reasons why I would want to represent all those who reside here, well, that can be taken as fact. What I would like to ask is this: do the residents of this city want to continue with the politics of disrespect and intellectual intolerance with an atmosphere such as permeates within leadership? People that are not within certain cliques are not heard. New ideas are not welcomed. Disenfranchisement breeds apathy, and if Waterville is to thrive, all must be welcomed. For as politicians, we must represent everyone equally, not just ones we agree with. I will represent everyone with respect, regardless of ideologies, because the people of this city deserve nothing less.
Thank you very much, Karen. I think this is the first campaign I've been involved with when you bring up the issue of talking trash, it actually has a meaning. And so my first question reflects that. I'm going to ask the question, but then I'm going to also ask some follow-up prompts, and you can respond to any or all of those. Do you support, yes or no, the city's new and controversial pay-as-you-throw trash collection system? In your response, see if you can address the following. Why or why not? Do you support the $2 cost per bag? If not, where will the recycling funding come from? In addition, the city solid waste ordinance has yet to be changed following the new program, and the city has said that it will not take action against those who leave unauthorized trash bags at the curb. Do you think the city ordinance should be updated? So any and all of those. Let's just start with yes or no. Do you support the system? Nick, we're rotating.
As is with the $2 bags?
Yes.
Just clarification? No.
Okay. Would you like to talk a little bit about the follow-up questions? Where will the recycling funding come from? And what about the solid waste ordinance?
I would love to. The reality is, as I've gone door to door, everybody I've talked to is thrilled with the curbside recycling. And I myself, through my own experience, have seen how much my waste can be reduced. And when we look at the city budget, we're saving so much more than we ever expected. It's up to $4,000 a week was the most recent report, and that's in the tipping fees, and that's something that we're going to have to continue to do if people want to have lower property taxes. One of the frustrations with the $2 bags was not only the rollout, but people have an issue with the fact that they are made out of state. They are quite flimsy. It's very hard to get those things shoved in there. I think we need to come together between now and June, and we need to come up with a joint solution, and that could be some towns do use stickers and they still create a revenue stream. It's cheaper to make, it can be made locally, and it supports the local economy, but it's still creating a revenue stream, and it's still a cost associated with throwing away the rubbish. What I would like to do is do something like they do in Scarborough, is also explore the option of just simply letting people have a certain size of 2 containers. One is for curbside recycling, one is for the rubbish removal, and it's very successful. And if we can continue to keep the tipping fees down by lowering the trash without charging the $2 fees, because that's only a small portion of the savings. It's a new revenue stream. But it's really the reduction of trash that creates the great savings. So I have a great faith in the people of Waterville that if we're just honest with them about the financial situation of the city and that we have to reduce our trash, people are going to be willing to come in and take part in whatever it takes to make the city successful. I do believe the solid waste ordinance should be updated. If we have a policy that says people need to use the bags, and that's on the books, we should enforce that.
Okay, thank you. Karen, pay-as-you-throw.
I was the only counselor to vote 3 times against the pay-as-you-throw program. One of the reasons being is that I do represent Ward 7, and when the majority of my constituents come up to me and say, we do not want this, it is my duty to vote the way they want me to vote, which is what I did. So it's not that I'm against recycling. I think recycling is an amazing thing and should always be continued. But it's the voice of the people that must be heard. They are the ones that elected us. And that is the best thing that we have, democracy. And when we stray from that, then there's something wrong. Now, as for updating the ordinance, we have an election in June, which may recall this. So to update the ordinance means right now, it's not worth it, unless this passes in June. At that juncture, yes, update the ordinance, if the majority of the people still want pay-as-you-throw.
Thank you. Steve?
Yes, I personally am very comfortable with the new system. I mean, I use less than a small bag every week. But I personally am not uncomfortable with the cost either. But it's not about me. It's about a lot of people who are pressured into acquiring the bags by this program who simply can't afford to squeeze another nickel out of their budget. I would also concur that I've heard a lot of people say that the bags manufactured out of state, why is that necessary, and they're flimsy. I think those are all issues that need to be fleshed out, worked out. during this coming 9 months before you get back to the time of a referendum. But I think in the interim, I would stay away from revising any local ordinances, and let's see if we can work the bugs out. If we can't, there are options out there. I've seen the options down in southern Maine, and yet I know that this program has worked in places like Presque Isle and Sanford. We're not those towns, but I think that we have to have an opportunity to work out the bugs and see what can come of this.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Okay, second question, and we're going to start with Karen. Pretty basic question. What should the city do to improve economic development and its tax base to create more job opportunities for the people of Waterville and the surrounding area?
One of the first things I think the city should do is, and we have looked into this, is the Trafton Road Exchange. By putting the exchange there, this will spur industry to come, such as anything that we can do with technology. It's a quick in, it's a quick out. We also have our Waterville Airport, and with the airport, the money is made with the selling of fuel, and it's been successful. We have an amazing manager there that has gone above and beyond. It is his love, it is his passion, this airport, and as a councilor, we have supported him. And by supporting the airport, we're also supporting the local restaurants. We are supporting the local hotels. What we're trying to do is to get the business from Augusta. We have summer camps. We have Colby College who utilize the airport. This is our #1 priority. Also with the exchange on the Trafton Road, if we do get that, it lessens the traffic on KMD, which adds to the safety of the traffic and the pedestrian traffic. These are things that we need to do to bring in businesses, is to start anew. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Steve?
Well, I think there's obviously a number of things which we have to do. I'm in agreement with doing the Trafton Road interchange. Certainly, if other facts come to light in the process that say, no, you shouldn't do it, then my mind's open. You know, I listen to evidence, to what more than what people say. There's plenty of quantitative evidence that could be produced during a debate regarding that interchange. I'm also in agreement with regard to the development of the airport. But I think that perhaps the leading point with your question about reducing the tax rate, and I think there are a number of ways to do that. I think it is within...
It's actually expanding the tax base.
Expanding the tax base?
Yep, sorry about that.
Okay. Well, then we'll hold the rest of it for later. I think we also need to be able to be attractive enough through our arts and recreation base to draw more full-time residents into the city, to encourage single-family residential construction. We still have the room and the space to do that. And I think that would increase our accessible base so that, I mean, we're never going to reach Falmouth's $15 a thousand, but nevertheless, we can draw this cost down significantly, I think.
Thank you very much. Nick?
This is going to be one of the greatest challenges of whoever is in city government here. The first thing we need to do is we really need to change our focus from trying to attract more retail businesses to really trying to rebuild our manufacturing base. When we do that, we need to understand that the new manufacturing jobs in this economy don't look like they did 50 years ago, where gains aren't going to be made probably by hundreds of jobs at a time. They're probably going to be 10 to 20 jobs at a time using a lot of new technology. We really need to work with our city attorneys to stretch the limits on how we use the tax incremental financing, because that's one of the really only tools we have to provide incentives when we're realizing that we're competing with every municipality in the state. So we have to provide the tax incentives to businesses. What we should do is meet with business leaders and find out what those challenges are and figure out a way to use that captured capital from the tax incremental financing to direct it in the way we need it. We need to stay away, I think, from credit enhancement agreements, which is where we get into trouble. That's where that captured revenue goes back to the developer, and it isn't always used in a way that's most beneficial to the city. On the housing front, we really need to try to stabilize our neighborhoods, and that's going to come through a increase of using zoning and coding, zoning and code enforcement to really save our neighborhoods. I've talked to a lot of people who say, Nick, this neighborhood looked very different 20 years ago, and it's very saddening to some people, some of the decay that we see. I think we can use enforcement to change that, but it does have to be a dual front of housing and new manufacturing base.
Thank you. Next question. City Manager Mike Roy has stated publicly that he has no intention of working with the current owner of the Levine's building in downtown Waterville, Mike Sirachi of Connecticut, on the redevelopment of that property following disagreements about an application for a city loan to pay for part of the cost. Is there anything the mayor can or should be doing on this issue? And if so, what would you do? And we're going to start with Steve.
Well, I think we might end up a little bit late in the game since the animosity has been built already. But I think that that's just a position where a mayor can act as an intermediary. It seems to me, it feels like there's some personal friction and distrust here. And what a mediator does traditionally is to break down those barriers, those animosities, those personal parts of a conflicted situation so that you can get back to ground one. I don't know the facts. I'm not privileged to what's gone on between Mike and Mr. Soriachi, but I think that a mayor's role could be very possibly in any number of instances to be that mediator, that buffer, that person who has an ability to bring the situation back into its focus.
Thank you. Nick, Levine's?
I will concur with Steve. We don't know all of the facts in the general public, and that's just the reality of the situation. From my conversations with the current members of the City Council, I would really hate to second guess too much the people working in our city government. They're working tirelessly. They're not there to turn away deals. That said, in private business all the time, when we're trying to focus on solutions, I mean, the goal is always growth. And to do that, you have a lot of people with strong personalities, and you do need to get them together. Oftentimes, it does start by going to one party, hearing that side, going to the other party, and then trying to whittle away until we can get to a middle ground. I don't know if that's possible in this particular situation. I think there's a lot of variables that we just don't know. But like I said, I would really hate to second guess that the folks that are in city government right now and the council, as well as Mike Roy, are there to purposely turn away business if they could.
Thank you. Karen?
In this situation, it's a private business owner. If they don't want to do business with the city, that is their choice. But as a mayor, you need to reach out to them. And under new administration, this very well may work out. At this juncture, we don't know particularly all the ins and outs of the deals, of the talks that have gone on. But as a mayor, then you get to know those things, the background. So through communication and reaching out towards the gentleman, it could be resolved. We don't know. It's something that we would have to continue talks with.
Thank you. The following question is from the audience. What are your plans in providing further support and funding of the Mid-Maine homeless shelter? And I believe it is Nick's turn.
Well, my plan right now would be to wait until the next budget comes out. I mean, we're going to be talking about a budget that we have no facts on right now. The homeless shelter has obviously been one of the greatest charitable gifts that the people of Waterville have given to Central Maine. And it is very important because people are down on their luck. And when I was in high school, back before this homeless shelter was built, I used to come early in the morning to deliver breakfast with Mike Marston, who has been a big advocate for the homeless shelter for years. And so I know that the people are people who are truly down on their luck. This is not people taking advantage of a system. So while we do need to make sure that we're giving the support that we can, we've got to look at our budget because we we need to have factual basis before we can say what we're going to give for a donation.
The homeless shelter is a great success. I've heard wonderful things about it, and when I was teaching adult education, the class that I taught, actually, a few of the students live there. So one of the projects that we did was we raised $1,000 for the homeless shelter by making Christmas wreaths. And to the people that were living there, it was one of the greatest gifts that they ever gave back because they were helped. As for the funding of the homeless shelter, we do need to look at the budget. We don't know where we're going to be standing. We don't know who's going to be contributing to the homeless shelter, whether it be a nonprofit. We don't know. And we can't make decisions based on an unknown. Until we find that out, the decision cannot be made. But the homeless shelter has been a savior to so many.
Thank you, Steve.
I think that the funding of the homeless shelter points to a problem that I've circled any number of times, and that is that this is a service center, but we're not treated as a center. The state should be looking at this as a regional service. I'm a firm believer in regionalization of any number of things. And I think in that case, there's no question about it. The pressure should not be on the taxpayers of Waterville to fund this. If it came around and it were a critical situation, I'd have to think about it very carefully. But my first position is that it is a regional resource. The folks who go to the homeless shelter come from the entire area. And so I'm not sure why the expectation is, again, that only Waterville might have an obligation to this.
Thank you. The next question. Do you believe the quality of life in Waterville has improved or declined over the past 4 years? What would you do as mayor to improve the quality of life? We'll start with Karen.
I don't think the quality of life has declined in the city of Waterville. I think it's been status quo for a while. I think we've been stagnant. And what I would do to improve the neighborhoods, and I have been an advocate about revitalizing the neighborhoods, we have a land trust now. It's called the Waterville Community Land Trust. And their goal is to buy homes that would have been, or homes that were foreclosed by the city, and to redo them, and to sell them at a reasonable price so that people can afford them. We've come to, I mean, Waterville's known as a Section 8 housing city. And it's not by fault of what's going on, but we need to get the home ownership up in this city. We have way too many rentals, and once you bring homeowners in here, the quality of life does improve because the neighborhoods improve. And if we can get the technological jobs and the hospital jobs here, they all make good money. We have our schools. It's not that we're a poor city, but we need to get people say, I want to live in Waterville, I want to stay in Waterville, and I want to work in Waterville.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
I think over time that we have become a poorer city financially. All the demographic data shows us that. But that doesn't mean that we can't approach it with a realistic eye. The land trust movement will create some opportunities. I've suggested before that many houses that have been abandoned but are not derelict are owned by out-of-state, third-party, fourth-party mortgage companies. We need local lending institutions to be aggressive in forming some sort of a consortium to bring those property ownerships back to us locally so that we can act more readily and reasonably on it. When it takes 6-8 months just to locate the owner of a derelict property, then something is terribly, terribly wrong, and that's the financial system. So I think that our greatest asset is the people we have, and that should be encouraged, therefore, in terms of home ownership and so on, because it's very, very important that we have that stable base to work from.
Thanks a lot. Nick, quality of life question.
I think it depends on who you ask. The quality of life for me certainly hasn't declined. I would say it's probably maintained. The reality is, though, taxes are way too high in Waterville, and this simply is not going to be an easy problem to solve. Aside from advocating to the state to fulfill their mandate, what we've seen is that whether we get revenue sharing back or not, I promise this will get revisited by another politician in Augusta sometime down the road. The first thing we need to do is take a very, very aggressive approach to increasing our tax base. It just comes back to bringing in those manufacturing jobs and, like I said before, working with code enforcement and zoning laws to prevent further decay in our neighborhoods. If we don't get more people here, the quality of life will eventually suffer. But for the people that are here, we need more money in their pockets.
Thank you very much. Okay, tough question coming up. This forum is taking place in a nonprofit venue, as Thomas College is a nonprofit entity. As such, Thomas College is exempt from the local property tax. Some employees feel that charging Thomas a fee in lieu of property taxes ignores our economic impact, which is estimated to be over $30 million to the community. Those harboring this view say that the fee is equivalent to a property tax. A fee equivalent to a property tax levy could cause a chilling effect, slowing the college's recent growth and curbing economic development that we're engaged in now. Each of you has taken a position on this question, including taking a position on a state fair share legislation. Starting with Steve, please provide the rationale for your decision to the audience.
Well, I guess I'll say, first of all, that many people know this is a subject that I've approached for years because of the aggregate effect of tax exemption on this community. We have 13 square miles, and a third of that is tax exempt. Some people insist that we don't even talk about that subject, that we just accept it as a given. If I were running a business, I would not accept one out of every 3 customers not paying. Of course we need to discuss it. There are any number of possible solutions, but we have to come to that. I think the first thing we have to do is have everyone at the table engaged in the conversation, rather than create a fait accompli and say, no, we're going to go to Augusta and do this. I've been down that road. That doesn't work. There are a lot of very expensive lobbyists that showed up to block any movement in that direction. So what we need to do is have this occur from the ground up. It isn't about Thomas, just about Thomas. It isn't about Colby. It isn't about the Chamber of Commerce. It isn't about houses of religious worship. It isn't about fraternal organizations. It's about the aggregate problem that exists that handicaps our development.
Thank you. Nick?
The reality is that to say that we're going to go to Augusta and have the laws changed to tax nonprofits shows an incredible amount of naivete about how this would actually play out in reality. What would happen is we would go to Augusta, and hundreds of thousands of dollars that could have been spent on economic development here in Waterville through partnerships that have already started under this current administration with Mayor Heck, who's brought these people to the table already, that would be spent on lobbying to defeat the measure, which it would get defeated. And then when we came back empty-handed, we would have burned all of the bridges that could have helped us get to where we need to go. Most people know in this room, I believe, that I'm the treasurer at the Maine Children's Home for Little Wanderers, and I can tell you what a great tax load would mean to us. What it would mean is less underprivileged children going to summer camp every year, less teen parents in the teen parent school program getting the counseling that they desperately need. It would mean less children waking up on Christmas morning with boxes of toys, books, and clothing. Frankly, I'd prefer not to be the Grinch who stole Christmas.
Karen, nonprofit exemptions.
Well, I know I don't want to be the Grinch that stole Christmas either. But are we just talking the colleges or the nonprofits? Clarify that for me,
I think
please.
nonprofits in general.
Nonprofits in general. No, I said I would tax the nonprofits, and I said that the last debate that I was at. The reason being, it is a different time, but we all need to work together. If the nonprofits and the colleges, Thomas, Kobe, can all come together and say, No, this is what we can do for the city, not just volunteerism. We appreciate that. We get the students from Thomas and Colby at the junior high all the time volunteering their time, and they do a wonderful job. The kids love them. The students interact wonderfully. But times have changed, and Waterville right now is really in a quagmire. And Augusta right now is not giving us our revenue sharing. If they would do what was promised, then this would not even be on the table. So our legislators in Augusta need to advocate for us, because Waterville is a service city. It's not what it was. Back when I was growing up, Waterville was not a service city. We had people living here, we had different things. Times have changed. We've had people come in, we've had like the homeless shelter, we have all these different things that do help people. But to help these people, it costs money. It costs money, and we can't put the burden on the residents any longer. Something's going to break. We need to come together. We need to figure this out. The nonprofits, the colleges, and the administration.
All three of you, my compliments on a very good answer to that question. Number 7 on my sheet here is, how do we make the airport business model and the foreign trade zone work for Waterville? We're going to start with Nick.
That's a good question. How do we make it work for Waterville? Well, I think I don't know what we've really done to get our names out there with the foreign trade zone. One of the things is we have a lot of different groups right now working on economic development. And there's always this talk about getting them together and forming one group so we can really have a focus. That's what we need to do. We have, if we have 3 different groups or 4 or 5 different groups who are all pursuing different things, we can't direct that focus. I do think that any administration, and that includes the mayor, also the TIF council, and other resources we have to work with the airport and whatever groups are out there and to bring in business. But if we can attract new businesses, the airport becomes a way to ship those goods out, just like the rail tracks. So I would go back to, it still comes back to trying to rebuild that manufacturing base so we can have products that we can get to market.
Thank you. Karen?
We have a secret weapon at the airport right now, and his name is Randy. Randy's our manager, and he works very hard to promote the Waterville Airport. We also have KV Cog, who works very hard to promote our airport. So when we want free trade to come here, because with that, we have planes coming in, going to Bangor, going to Augusta, all different places. So we do want them, but we have to market. We have to market to particular industries, and that's the first thing we need to do. We need to find out what industries that can fly in and do the job.
Steve?
I think seeing this airport growth only, I think in terms of the quality first of the facility and the runways, excuse me, the instrument landing system, so we're sophisticated enough to attract the kind of air traffic that we can handle, that we can sell the jet fuel. But I think the larger question is how we expand the use of the airport and its area. And I think the more that we create any opening for increased traffic there by private carriers especially, then that will spread to the larger carriers. If we can make that airport a gateway to ski areas, much as it's a gateway to the Belgrade Lakes areas, I mean, everyone had to have noted the increased amount of private jet traffic during the summer season. There's no reason that can't go on in the winter too. And I think from there, those people who obviously can afford to bring in their own jets with their own pilots, have some influence and ability to assist us to grow that trade zone more. And so it's engaging people beyond just we're here, we go there, we come back, and we leave. But no, if you come here, we're going to ask you to be engaged here and help us grow this asset.
Thank you. The next question comes from the audience again, and the question is, how would you lead Waterville to becoming a zero-emission city? And we're going to start with Karen.
Well, I think to become a zero-emission city, that would require legislation from Augusta. If the majority of our residents want that, then I think we need to go lobby Augusta to have the laws changed. That's something that a mayor is not going to be able to do, nor is it going to be something that the council is able to do. That would be a federally mandated ordinance or resolution or law.
I would agree with Karen, except that if you're looking at the question and saying, could it occur voluntarily? Could the mayor be the spokesperson for that goal with implementing certain goals? I doubt that we'll ever get to zero, but I think could we do much more in that direction to really create a zero emission environment, no matter the fact that we're on the wind and we can't control that part. But I think that's a laudable goal, to be a city pretty driven by the whole concept of renewable energy. We've seen that growth that happen. We see a German economy, I think now, that generates 30%, I think, of its electricity through solar. All of this is very, very, very possible and very, very provocative, and I have to wonder if this city became a leader in that movement, that it wouldn't benefit us greatly from an economic development standpoint.
Thank you. Okay.
As was said, this is not something that the mayor is going to be able to do, and neither the council. But we also have to be realistic about the financial situation. Most of these things like solar and wind power are successful right now, at least in the current form, only with very heavy federal subsidies. This is not a financial model that we could jump to at this time. In that sense, I think we just need to be realistic and say that's not going to happen right now, and it's not something that the mayor is going to do.
Thank you very much. Next question is, defend your position on whether Main Street should be a one-way or a two-way street, and do you agree with the current parking configuration on Main Street? So we're going to begin with Steve.
I think I'm next. Well, actually, I have no position on it. I think that using Main Street as much as I do, that the current configuration works for me. I haven't seen a great deal of truck traffic there. At times, logging trucks come down through, and I understand the idea of diverting that traffic out around it, but perhaps it can be answered in another way. And again, I have to go back to the whole idea of public engagement on the front end of this. That would be very controversial. We've gone through this now with the pay-as-you-throw. And so it would be a mistake not to engage the public fully from neighborhood to neighborhood in a discussion about whether we should do this or not, so that we learn what the advantages and the disadvantages might be.
Very good, thank you. Nick?
I think Main Street used to be two-way. It's one-way for a reason, because it probably works better. And I agree with Steve, though. I'm going to have to say this is an issue that if we were going to spend that kind of money, that we would frankly probably have to go to bond for and borrow, or we're going to raise taxes to do it, because that would be a very expensive project to configure that just with the engineering costs alone. That would be something that we would really have to have a lot of public discussion about. That's not something that I would take a stance on either way without that.
Currently, Main Street works fine. I think there's not a lot of problems with it. When the big vehicles come down, I think, and the parking diagonally, there is a problem with that, because I don't think people can see around it for the pedestrian traffic. That would be something I would look more into than changing it to a two-way street. I think that we need to maybe look at how can we change the parking on Main Street that's more pedestrian-friendly to the citizens.
Thank you. Next question, is there a difference between a good and a bad TIF? tax increment financing. And we will start with Karen. Is it Karen?
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, I think a bad tip is if it doesn't work and we're wasting the money. But an example of a good tip is the Hathaway Center. We've got a lot of people living there. We have businesses there. It's within walking of Main Street. We've worked with Paul. He's been amazing to work with. He's very interested in the city and making it a great place to live. That is a good example of a TIF. So those are the things that we want to look for. And maybe using money for a study with the traffic is a bad way to use the TIF. It depends on, I think, what you're looking for. But the Hathaway building is a great example of when something goes right and it works well.
Steve, changed the order that time, but thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I'm fully aware of TIF guidelines and recently spoke against extending the use of TIFs to housing per se. I mean, the conditions when it would apply or not. I think the Hathaway was a perfect example of how you could do a mixed-use TIF and really add to something, and I understand that that's only a step in redeveloping downtown. So and I was very supportive of that as a councilor. But I think there are occasions when TIFs are moved outside the boundaries of reason. I didn't agree when TIF money was extended to Mid-State Machine, because my understanding is TIF money is for development. And by the time that issue came to council, Mid-State Machine had already been up and operating out there on West River Road for a good 6 months. So it certainly wasn't an incentive to encourage development. It was more like a reward for bringing some decent paying jobs here, but that's not what TIFs are for. Certainly the Elm Plaza TIF was just incredibly beyond reach, and thankfully that one I believe will expire this year, and it should add some, I think, $450,000 to the tax base. So that's hopefully, but you really have to make sure you get the return on this because it's an investment, it's a public investment.
Very good. Nick.
I support the use of TIFs greatly. There are good and bad TIFs. I think Steve mentioned one with the Elm Plaza, but I think this is a very confusing topic for people. And so one of the things that we ought to do is really hold a public forum in a place outside of City Hall to just explain to people this whole idea of captured revenue, because a TIF in and of itself actually prevents money from going to Augusta. It keeps it here in the community. A lot of times what we don't distinguish between is the TIF and the credit enhancement agreement, like I explained before, which is that's where we take the money from that captured revenue and it goes directly back to the developer, and we don't always get the use that we want. I think we should push the envelope. I've been an advocate for this again and again. If we're not being questioned by the state when the state's taking away our revenue sharing, then I don't think we're doing enough. I think we need to sit down with business leaders, sit down with manufacturers or whoever wants to come to Waterville and say, what are your challenges? What tax incentive could we provide to you that would help you come here and expand the jobs, expand perhaps the building itself, however, whatever it is, and really try to hammer out some different and creative ways that we haven't quite seen yet.
Okay, Steve, I'm going to ask you to go first on this. Waterville has a little over 11,000 registered voters, and of those, about 4,500 are registered Democrats, 4,200 are unenrolled, and 1,900 are registered Republicans. The city's last 3 mayors have represented all 3 of these voting blocks on the election ballot. Paul LePage, now governor, is a Republican. Dana Sennett, who served a partial term, was a Democrat. And outgoing Mayor Karen Heck ran with no party affiliation. Given those numbers and the recent history of those elected mayors, please explain your path to victory as the next mayor of Waterville, and please describe why voters of different parties or of no party should vote for you.
My path is door to door, knocking on doors, every door, every door I can reach in every ward, with a particular focus certainly on Democrats and unenrolled, because that's my base, that's our base. But that doesn't mean when you become mayor, however you reach that all of a sudden you only listen to that group. It's absolutely essential that the mayor and council members, when they're able to, get out into the neighborhoods and listen to people without regard to any designation. Because there's a lot of talented people out here that have a lot of good ideas that need to be explored and be open to. So I think the path is really simple. I don't need to spend a lot of money. I just need to walk and knock and talk and listen, and then carry that over into any mayoral position so that you do the same thing, that you create a greater sense of engagement in the community, and will benefit from that.
Thank you. Nick, why should voters of different parties vote for you?
Well, first, I'd just like to say I'm glad to hear that Steve would want to work with Republicans, too. He, a week or so ago, wrote a letter to the editor saying that Republicans tear at the very fabric of democracy. So I'm glad to hear that we're still welcome at the table. The reality is, as I've gone door to door throughout the city, I can promise the newspapers make a lot bigger deal in the mayor's race about party than the citizens of Waterville do. I have gone to one house after another, and it hasn't made a difference. What people want to know is that you care about Waterville, because the issues that we are facing as we go towards the future are not Republican issues, they are not Democrat issues, because we are all either going to rise or fall together. And so what people care about is that we have a competent leader who is going to listen to them and have the wherewithal to try to lead us forward.
Thank you, Nick. Karen?
I think times have changed. I don't think so much that the candidate really is based on the parties, as you can tell by the number of unenrolled people we have in the city. I think people are tired of the same old politics. They're tired of, I'm a Republican, you're a Democrat, and this is how we vote. We can only vote party lines. People are ready for a change now. And everyone that I've talked to, whether it be Republican, Democrat, or unenrolled, they've been very receptive. They want to talk. They want to tell you their issues. And that's the key. They want you to listen. And when we listen, we all come together to solve the problems that we have now. And it's not that the city is divided. The city is just ready for change, and it's ready to rise above it and come together and be what it was at one time, a wonderful city, and it is a wonderful city, so I don't want to take that out of content, but we want to be successful. We want people to say, you're from Waterville? Wow, I want to live there. That's what we want, and I think that's what each and every voter wants. They want to be proud of where they live.
Thank you, Karen. And it's hard to believe, but we're at that 8-minute mark. And so we are going to have closing statements now. Goes by fast. I'm going to put the closing statements in reverse alphabetical order so that we can change it up from the opening statements. And so that means that we're going to begin again with you, Karen.
Thank you.
Your closing statement. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. The reasons that I decided to run were brought on through my service on the City Council. When I, as a councilor at times, became disillusioned with the way local government acted towards people, I witnessed 2 mayors, different parties, yet at times the disregarding attitudes of both bore a striking resemblance. It is very easy to throw stones, but harder to mend those wounds. When both sides commit these transgressions, we all lose. It is time for respect, honesty, and an open mind. Through these 3 noble purposes do seem to be a problem to the politicians and the machines that back them. I intend to be the instrument of change, that with you, backing brings back a civility that no one would expect, no less of in their own household. A mayor needs to be the person that brings as many citizens together for a common good. There is always the middle ground, and I intend to stand there, and I welcome all who would join me.
Thank you very much. Nick, you're up.
Great, thank you, and thank you all for coming tonight. I do want to take this time, since I have 3 minutes, to thank my very pregnant and uncomfortable wife, Amanda, in the front row, and my son, Tony, and Sophia. Certainly their sacrifices have been a lot greater than mine during this campaign, and I just want to say thank you very much. When we look at the candidates in this race, we see Karen and Steve, who have spent between them, two of them, many years in city government, and they should certainly be commended for that. And I thank anyone who is willing to step up and do what is absolutely a thankless job, and one that not many people are willing to take. But we also need to be honest about the fact that during that time, they haven't used those leadership roles to implement the very ideas and solutions that we're trying to come up with here tonight. Waterville is in an interim period as we are trying to move forward from a past that doesn't exist anymore into a new century where the economy and jobs just look so different. And so we need a leader who can not only restart dialogue and bring people together and bring the government outside of the council to the people, but we also need somebody who has the business sense and the financial background, who can sit with business leaders and who want to provide jobs but just don't think that they can afford to. It's not an easy thing, I can promise you, and I know that every business in every community that we look at in the banking world has an incredible impact on the community around them, and the community around them has an incredible impact on the success or failure of that business. I think I am that person, and I am asking for your vote, and I just want to say thank you again.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm here before you as a Democrat, committed to fair taxation, truly equal opportunity, creative use of all our resources, and an unflagging desire to move the city forward. We will grow the city in partnership with our neighbors. We can and will enlist them to help us address the fact that this small city, by state law, has 1/3 of its accessible property as tax exempt. No one is talking about a full bill, but we are talking about numerous potential remedies to address this untenable situation. It does not necessarily exist in the property tax. We need to build our existing small businesses to their full capacity. We have to do that all we can to attract new businesses that pay a fair and living wage. We have to lead in creating a broad wave demanding that the minimum wage be raised to a living level. That added money will be spent on the street and boost our local economy. We have to ask that all our employers of subcontractors of any size include wage standards in their contracts. Our schools and our living space must be made attractive and competitive. I will fight beside any allies who will press to have the state fulfill its full financial obligation to its municipalities. Tied directly to state payments will be a promise to reflect those revenue increases in reduced property tax rate and better municipal services. The current 2740 is unacceptable and further reduces the demand for single-family residences here. I will act to nourish a growing and vibrant arts community. The seeds have been planted and continue to flourish in a dozen different places. These beginnings need all the care and attention we can as a community provide them, because they will become such a great part of our assets. We also sit at the center of an agricultural resurgence in central Maine. Local organic produce surrounds us and is readily available. As a founding member of the Sustain Mid-Maine Coalition and now a board member of a new project called the Kale Project, I will commit myself to local, sustainable economies and, like the Cotlass Connection, reach to connect this city nationally and internationally. We have every right to expect great success in that area. I have said before that I now favor going forward with the Trafton Road interchange. This option has been pursued on and off for 30 years. If future evidence indicates otherwise, I could change my mind, but for now, this area along the West River Road is one of our best options to grow good-paying jobs. Good-paying jobs active and broad community participation, working alliances with our neighbor communities, leadership in the arts. I ask for your vote so that our mayor can put his considerable energy, skills, and creativity into these tasks. And most of all, I ask you all to make sure you vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first thank a few people, and I'll start with the candidates. I find the three candidates to be very learned and well-spoken. It's been an honor to be your moderator today. I've got a gift for you, a pen at your seat. I hope you enjoy it. It's a Thomas College pen. It's official. Carry it with you.
Thank you.
I'd also like to thank my two student timers, Stephanie Foster and Steve Charette. Thank you very much for coming and helping us today. I'd like to thank Karen Heck for serving as mayor. I think she did a fine job. I'd like to thank Scott Monroe. Working with him over the last couple of weeks has been very easy, and I've enjoyed working with him. Looking forward to more of that. And I also want to offer you a personal tour of Thomas College. Come see our college, how we've grown, how we're serving our community. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to visit. I hope to see you all here. That brings us to the end of our program this evening. I hope you have a good evening. Thank you.